Hello and welcome to episode 35, or is it 50, of PhotoKitchen. I am your humble host, Welch, and today it is the battle of standard primes, the 35mm versus the 50mm in a prime lens shootout. Now, I want to say at the very start, I'm not going to explain to you why they're called standard prime lenses. You could go ahead and Google that. We don't want to waste your time in this video. We value you. We value your time. Thanks for watching. Number two, I am not going to go into a big, deep lens comparison, Canon versus Nikon. This is all about focal lengths, not about who makes the best 35 or who makes the best 50. It's whether or not a 35mm focal length is better for you than a 50mm focal length. I will say at the very beginning, I don't think you need to own both of these lenses. I do. I'll get into that why a little bit later on in the video. And the last thing is I'm going to give you a clear winner at the end of this video. Now, a lot of reviews will always be like, well, it depends on what type of photography that you're doing. Sure, that makes perfect sense. And that does apply here. But there are some clear reasons to get the 50mm over the 35 and vice versa. So let's jump right into things, starting with the 50mm. This lens, more than any lens ever made, is most often recommended by photographers to other photographers when answering the following question. I have a little bit of money. What lens should I buy next? It's always the 50mm as far as recommendations go. There's a lot of reasons for this. The number one is affordability. There used to be a time that you could get what was called a nifty 50, a sub $100 brand new 50mm prime lens out of the box. Those days are behind us because of inflation, but also because of the mirrorless revolution. But you could still get a mirrorless lens for around the $200 mark. A little bit cheaper if you're looking at the used market or maybe a third-party lens manufacturer. There's a lot of value for the 50mm. And that value continues on no matter how much the 50mm costs. Whether you're buying a lower-end, budget-friendly 50mm or the highest-end 50mm made by a company, it will always be more affordable than a similarly spec'd 35. Take that entry-level 50mm. If you look at the Sony version of it, the 1.8 version is about $250. The 35mm version is about $700, about 3 times as much money. And this is going to go on as you go up in price points. It's just the way that things are. This is an easier lens to manufacture. It doesn't have as many optical issues, so companies can make it at a more affordable price point. So regardless of what type of 50mm that you're going to get, you're always going to find it's more budget friendly than a comparable 35mm. So 50mm wins the budget category. But another thing the 50mm wins in is availability. As mentioned earlier, it's an easier lens to make. There are more of them out there. Also, a lot of other third-party companies will make 50mm and make a very good quality 50mm. So if you're looking for a lot of variety or a lot of different options, you're going to find that in the 50mm focal length far more than the 35mm. Also, another thing you're going to find in the 50mm is technological advancement. Usually companies will use the 50mm because of that ease of making it optically. They will usually put a little bit more technology into the 50mm or give you something crazy in the higher spec range. Take the Nikon Not Deluxe 55. I know it's not 50mm, but it's close enough. That lens goes all the way to 0.95 for its maximum aperture. Sure, it costs as much as a used Civic, but it just goes to show you that companies are going to flex their technological muscle in the 50mm focal range rather than the 35mm. So the 50 wins on budget, it wins on availability, and it also wins on technology. So with all of that being said, why the heck would you even think about a 35mm? Well, for me, this lens is the moneymaker. There's not a piece of glass that I own that hasn't put more money in my bank account than the 35mm. And that's because I'm an environmental portrait shooter, and the 35mm excels at that far more than the 50. Take a look at these two images of my friend Grace that we snapped before we started to get into our shoot. Well, they're not anything special. Do take note on how much the 50mm compresses the background. That's a great feature. But if you're doing environmental portraiture, compare it to the 35. The 35 just shows off more of the environment. If you're photographing a CEO on an assembly line, or a park ranger in a forest, or a fireman in a firehouse, you want to see more of that environment, and the 35mm is going to give it to you. Another place the 35mm excels is event photography. Whether you're in a nightclub, whether you're shooting weddings, corporate events, it doesn't make a difference. The 35mm is far better than the 50mm for a very big reason. Our focal length of our human vision is about 40 to 43 millimeters when you put that on a normal 35mm sensor. That means that the 35 is just a little bit wider than your field of vision. So when I'm going around a busy event and I'm worried about backing into people or bumping into people, I could have the camera away from my face, gather a group of people or even an individual, compose them in my eye, in my normal field of vision, bring the camera up and I'm just a little bit wider than that field of vision and I'm able to make that image. I don't have to worry about backing up, bumping into a table, falling into a fountain or anything like that. Now, there's going to be somebody who's going to write in the comments, oh, well, that's what the 24-70 is for. And indeed, you're right. We're comparing 35 to 50, and I do like the extra low light feature that the 35 gives me, also for the value of it. And another reason, even though that these lenses are a little bit different, this is a 1.4 and 1.2, the weight and the size is significant. The 35 millimeter is just a smaller lens. It's easier to be running around and doing event work with rather than the 50. So before I go any deeper, I do want to share with you why I own both of these lenses. Right now, in my camera bag, I only have 4 lenses, a 20 millimeter prime, a 35 millimeter prime, a 50 millimeter prime, and a 135. Now, why do I only shoot prime lenses? That's for another video. But the 50 millimeter is my gap, my bridge between the 35 and the 135. I used to have an 85, but the 85 and the 135 were just too close. I just felt like the 85 didn't give me anything the 135 didn't already give me, and I just preferred the 135 more. I have a lens shootout video, by the way, that goes into that. I'll put that in the comments section below. But for me, the 50 millimeter gives me that bridge that I prefer. And the reason why I'm telling you that is because when I go into the studio, all of the assets that I just talked about with the 35 go away. I don't need that wide field of view. I don't need that deeper depth of field. So in studio, 50. Out of studio, 35 for me. One other thing about the 50 millimeter that I cannot let go is if I only have one lens, somebody says, hey, we're going out, we're going to shoot a variety of things, but it's primarily people, I'm probably taking the 50 millimeter, especially if the environments aren't great. I could back up and showcase that environment a little bit more. It's a bit of a headache compared to the 35, but it can be done with the 50. But that extra amount of compression, that shallower depth of field, especially if you have a lens that goes to 1.4 or 1.2 or that crazy 0.95, does really give you some advantages when you're working in conditions where you don't want to showcase that background. The 35 is great for showcasing. The 50 is great for hiding that. So this kind of leads us to the end of the video in answering the question, what lens is actually ideal for you? Well, I think if you're just starting off in photography or just getting into prime lenses, all of those features of the 50 millimeter cannot be ignored. It is a fantastic lens at any price point, any availability. You're going to be happy with just about any 50 millimeter that you buy. It is a great lens. Every camera manufacturer, every third party makes a great 50 millimeter. Of course, read the reviews, make sure that you're getting a good quality product, but you're probably not going to be let down by that. But if you are getting into environmental portraiture, if you're getting into any sort of event work, if you want to showcase that location a little bit more, maybe you're doing street photography and you want that little bit of a wider view, I cannot recommend the 35 millimeter enough. It is definitely the exception to the rule of how amazing the 50 millimeter is, but I guarantee you, you will like the 35 millimeter for those particular types of situations over the 50. So speaking of like, I hope you've liked this video. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And if you have, thank you for subscribing. Thanks for making it this long into the video. Also, please share this with anybody who might be looking at a 35 or 50 millimeter lens. And until next time, I'm Welch, wishing you all the best from PhotoKitchen.